Welcome, everybody, to the Underdog. Yeah, I like that.
Fantastic introduction, Arne. What
Thanks.
can I say? Can we stop now?
Yes, exactly. That's it for today. We see each other soon enough. Okay, now we're back with the Underdog. Last time it was mind-blowing, but I am absolutely certain you have found something more beautiful this time again.
Definitely. It's a game, of course, from the Tata Steel chess tournament, the Masters section. And of course, I would like to pay some special attention to the women's world champion, Ju Wenjun, who competed with the strongest players in the Masters section. So I have an interesting game. The only game she managed to win in the tournament, it sounds like she had a horrible tournament.
Yeah.
In fact, she had a very good tournament because she played a number of very nice games. Good result. In the end, she scored, I think, 4.5 points out of 13 games, being the bottom seed. That's not a bad performance at all. And the game we are going to discuss is against Alireza Firouzja.
Yeah.
And I think it was just a very nice technical game because we talked about the underdog many times before. But it's not easy when being the underdog in one game. But imagine when you're playing like 13 rounds in a row against players 100, 200 points higher rated than you.
Yeah.
Against the best players in the world. It's not gonna be a lot of fun, but I think she handled herself very well in this.
To tell you the truth, I think this is a perfect situation if you are the weakest player in a group because you have nothing to lose, right? You can, if you lose everything, that's what everybody expected. But if you win a couple of games, you could also play like a little bit more crazy, maybe here and there, or try out some stuff. And it's the pressure's on everybody else, right?
That's partly true. It really depends also on how the tournament is going. I would say she did very well. She played very tough chess, very difficult to beat. So a lot of long games.
Yeah.
There are also other players who were like the underdog in most of the games. And for instance, my fellow countryman Max Warmerdam, he played very well, had some winning positions, but forgot to convert them. And eventually he lost them. And then people will start following you round after round. And I think he had a series of 6 losses in a row. So I think it really depends on how the tournament is going.
That's
but
true.
Let's see in this game how it goes for Ju Wenjun as she plays against Firouzja, and we know Firouzja is going crazy in every game. He's taking risks, and definitely against lower rated players, he definitely wants to beat them with either color. So let's see. Ju Wenjun starts with 1d4, and already on move 1. Interesting moment as Firouzja goes for the move e6. And now you know that there are some move orders here. By going for the move e6, white can go for c4 and try to get mainline 1d4 openings, but there's also the possibility to play e4, get a transposition to the French. Maybe that's a small surprise that Ju Wenjun went for this line, but okay. Firouzja plays the French more often, but probably not via this move order.
A lot of games I've recently watched or seen are very French strongly related, and they're always a bit crazy. And normally, actually, Black has some trouble.
No, the truth is that there are a lot of developments there in the French.
Yes.
Let's not discuss them here today, but it's a really good fighters opening if you want to get a game. But I think the move played here by Ju Wenjun, some of you viewers will maybe stop watching after it, but others will really find it entertaining. White captured on d5. It's the exchange variation of the French. There are other main lines like protecting the pawn or advancing the pawn. Here we get a symmetrical position, and it's considered to be a kind of boring line, although there are also top grandmasters who are playing these symmetrical positions with the white pieces to play for a win. And think about the Berlin defense or the Petrov. There are also variations with the symmetrical pawn formation. And white is saying that, okay, only white can be a bit better here thanks to this extra move you have starting with white. So let's see how it goes. Knight f3, bishop d6, and what I think is interesting is that white goes here for the move c4. So Ju Wenjun is saying that, okay, please take my pawn, and then I can develop with a bishop immediately, and well, you have a typical isolated queen's pawn position with quite some active play for white. So that's the choice Black needs to make here, whether to take on c4 or not. Firouzja decided to play knight f6, but now white has the additional option even to advance the pawn to c5 and kick the bishop away. Bishop e7, bishop d3, both sides are castling, and you see that thanks to this pawn on c5, Black's position is a bit cramped, right? The bishop cannot move. How should you cope with it? Well, one idea is to play a move like b6 to challenge that pawn. Then white has different ways of playing. You may take, or you can also instead play the bishop to e3 to overprotect the pawn on c5. Well, anyway, it was not played in the game, as Firouzja went for the move bishop g4. White plays h3, useful move. Black maintains the pin with bishop h5, bishop e3, knight c6, knight bd2. Here you see that the knight wants to be on that square to support the knight on f3, and then the queen can move whenever it wants. So rook e8 played, and now I like the move played here in the game. There are various interesting possibilities, but white went for the move bishop b5. So here you see that white is looking for the opportunity to trade off the bishop for the knight and destroy the pawn formation on the c file.
That
would be forced to take back with a pawn.
That's indeed quite interesting because, I mean, yeah, there's the pin on f3, kind of, which you like decide to not take care of with the bishop. But then again, I guess you just can take your queen to c2 or something later.
Yeah, no, exactly. So the idea is that now the knight is taking care of the other knight on f3.
Yeah.
Black played here the move knight e4.
Yeah.
Ambitious move. You don't want to take because of d takes e4 with pressure against that knight on f3. But now white played interesting move to resolve this pin issues by playing the move queen a4 even. So basically same as what you had in mind, Arne, with queen c2, just you're putting also more pressure against the knight on c6. Knight takes d2 played, and white recaptures here, of course, with a knight, not allowing black to ruin the pawn formation on the king side.
Yeah, looks quite okay for white. I mean, yeah, I don't mind it. Black will have a bishop pair after that, I assume. But
well, let's see what happens. Bishop g5 on the board. So black is looking for some active play on the king side with the rook and the bishop hitting the bishop on e3. White first captured on c6, continuing the plan. B takes c6, but you have to be careful now. There's pressure against this e3 bishop. And you also don't want to take on g5 because then the queen becomes very active and hits the knight on d2. So instead, Ju Wenjun played here the move rook ae1.
Yeah, I would have played the same.
Yeah, no, you could have
Very
played also in the
logical,
Masters, so of course, yeah. So bishop takes, rook takes, everything comes off the board, and we have a very original structure now. It's of course a weak pawn on e3, and also the pawn on c6 is under an attack. But you also have this clash of bishop versus knight. And you can see that potentially this bishop on h5 is not such a great bishop because the pawns are placed on the same color on c6 and d5. Well, first queen e8 played, attacking the pawn on e3, rook e1.
And protecting c6 at the same time. Yeah,
a queen protects the pawn indeed, very important. But now things are getting sharper. This is interesting, as Firouzja is not looking for equality. He wants to get a sharper game, and he goes for the move f5. So he's trying to get in the pawn to f4, making use of the rook on e1 being unprotected on the e1 square. Queen a6 played. Remarkable idea, but you still in touch with the pawn on c6. But at the same time, after the move f4, now the queen comes back all the way to f1. This may have come as a surprise to most of us, but the idea is that you're attack the pawn on f4, forcing black to take. But now the queen goes back to d3. So white has invested a lot of time with her queen.
Yeah.
But black basically in the meantime didn't do much. Just black pushed the pawn all the way up to e3, but the pawn will be lost.
Wow.
And on the next move, white is able to take it. Well,
But
now, yeah, sorry.
sorry, no, but like just for the viewers, after e2, g4.
Actually, e2 was played in the game.
Ah.
And you always have the possibility here, indeed, to play the move g4. That's a good idea to interfere on that diagonal. Now, if the bishop would go away, you can take the pawn on e2. And what do you think in general? If queens are getting swapped here, who do you think is better here? Do you like white or?
Unclear, because of course d4 is such a vulnerable pawn. But then we have the open line. I guess I don't know. I'm not good in endgames. I wouldn't know if I would be happy as white. I think it's quite equal.
I think white is very comfortable here in this endgame because
Even
the
very
plan
comfortable,
is eventually to get your knight to e5. It's a beautiful outpost. You're attacking the pawn on c6. That's a long-term weakness. And the reason why white is better, it's because of the bishop. This light squared bishop is not attacking any of white's pawns. If, let's say, the bishop would have been on f6, it would have been a completely different story, attacking the pawn on d4. So there are some long-term problems, and that's what we see in the game as well. White didn't play the move g4. G4 is actually the best move in the position, but white played here knight f3 first. And the reason it's not the best move is just because white allows black to take the bishop for the knight, and then, okay, you will win the pawn back, but there's very good chance that black is able to hold this position. I mean, white is a bit better, but nothing too special. Instead, Firouzja is not interested in obtaining full equality. He wants desperately to play for a win. Played here the move queen f7. So the idea is, of course, to try to take on f3 and weaken the pawn formation on the king side. But now white goes for the move knight g5, attacking the queen and threatening to take on h7.
Oops.
Therefore, black has to play the move queen g6. Now, queens are coming off the board anyway. This is what white had been aiming for. Bishop takes, rook takes, e2. And basically, we have the same sort of endgame we briefly talked about. It's just that the knight on g5 is not doing that much. It may come to e6, but after the move h6, even better is to go back just to f3, so that the knight is on its way to e5.
Too powerful, and even if the bishop goes back to h5, you can still play g4 as
and still play g4, and black is no longer able to trade off that bishop for the
important lesson for everybody who's watching. It's so true, and I missed it when you were asking me for the evaluation, but this spot is just like, this knight is like a queen there.
Exactly. And the good thing is that black also doesn't have a queen, so here things are looking quite nice for white. Let's see what happens. Bishop e4 played, knight e5. Here you see that the pawn is really weak. You cannot actually defend it. Maybe black would have played a move like bishop e8, but that's also a step in the wrong direction, and it's probably not something which crossed Firouzja's mind. He's looking for active play. He's sacrificing the pawn. He played here the move a5. White captures on c6, and now places the pawn on a4, so that at some point, hopefully, this rook may be able to attack any of these pawns. But things are not that simple. White goes for rook e3. Rook a6, attacking the knight. The knight went back to b4. You may have also expected the knight just to come to e5. Looks maybe more logical to place it in the center. Knight b4, also interesting, but big difference with knight e5 is that now the rook can come to g6 to hit the pawn on g2. White plays the move g3 so that the rook supports it via the third rank. Black goes h5. There are sometimes ideas to go for h4 perhaps, but things are not that simple still. Rook a3 played, hoping to take the pawn, although after black played the move king f8, you cannot really take the pawn on a4 because it hangs the pawn
of course.
on g3. So first, king f2, protecting the pawn. Now white is about to take on a4, rook f6, check, king e2. Now the king is giving up the protection, so the black rook goes back, staying in touch with the pawn on g3. White is not in a rush. Played here the move h4. I like this move a lot, so that you're fixing the pawns on the opposite color of black's bishop, and you're fixing black's pawn on h5. King e8, rook e3. Simple trick here, knight takes d5. You gotta watch out. Anyway, the king goes to d7, getting out of that e file. White played the move a3. So looking at this position, you see white is a pawn up, but it will not be easy to convert that extra pawn. And let's see what is white going to undertake here to make some progress. Rook e6 played, king goes to d2, but then you see that the rook tries to get in via the other side. So king e2 back. Not in a rush. Yeah? This was move 40, probably just to get some additional time on the clock. Rook f8, and now white played here the move b3, just to get rid of that annoying pawn on a4. And after pawn takes, rook takes. Okay, white has a passed pawn, but the pawn is not running that fast. Yeah, if you would play something like rook a8, you see that it's still not easy to use that extra pawn on the queen side. And okay, bishop on e4. It doesn't have any targets, but it's also restricting the mobility of white's pieces. So this is still far from simple. But okay, Firouzja didn't play the move
Rook 8.
Rook a8. He played instead bishop g2. So there are ideas here to get the bishop perhaps around via f1 to c4. But okay, first rook e3 played. Now it doesn't make too much sense to place the bishop on c4 because white is planning to get in with the rook.
Okay.
To e5, hitting both the pawn on d5 and the pawn on h5. Bishop e4. And now, nice idea, knight a2. Now we are trying to get rid of that bishop. Knight a2, rook b8, knight c3. So you are attacking the bishop. The bishop also got to keep the pawn on d5 defended. Rook b2 check. So white is not afraid allowing the rook to come in. You can just come back with the king to e1. Knight also covers the b1 square. Rook b3, pinning the knight. And well, now the king comes to f2. So you're protecting the rook and you're indirectly defending the pawn on a3. That's a very subtle idea. After rook takes, it's knight takes e4. Rook takes e3, king takes, and well, you just get a winning king and pawn endgame with an extra pawn.
Yes, that's like exactly what I calculated the position before because it was the same, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Though this was one of the main ideas.
Yeah.
So pawn on a3, nicely indirectly defended by the rook. White's weaknesses are well covered. Another idea is that a rook check on b2 no longer makes sense because of rook e2. Everything is covered, and on the next move you can take on e4. So knight takes e4 is the big threat. Black moved the bishop away to h1. This looks kind of a funny move, but you also got to keep the pawn defended. What would you play here as white? What do you think is a nice idea here for white?
Yes, good question. I am, well, yeah. I think there is a reason why the rooks are still on the table. Otherwise, I would try to swap them. But probably it is more difficult for white to convert to a win. So, one idea. Oh no, it doesn't. No, well, I'm thinking about g4.
G4. This is such a radical move. Can I just take the pawn then?
Yeah, you can probably, and then you can go with the bishop to f3 and nothing is happening, I'm afraid. But I wanted to get space for my king so I can walk up to g7.
Wow, wow, wow. I like the idea, and we need it later on
Oh, okay.
in some of the lines, but be
Ah,
careful. One thing I don't like is that you trade off too many pawns. That's is something you should not do when you're on the
I agree.
strongest.
I agree. So then
So
I am not sure. Maybe King G1, but that's also no, it's not working. It's a repetition.
yeah, then the bishop will go back to e4, and
Exactly.
you,
Yeah.
you also got to keep your rook defended. So, well,
Hmm.
not simple at all.
Hmm.
Let me show you what happened in the game. White played here the move 91.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably something you would not have expected, but you do offer the exchange of rooks. You prevent a check on b2, so the rook goes back. And well, White played here the move rook e5. So the rook is trying to become active, but okay, objectively things are not that
And
simple
I
here.
was wrong. As I mentioned earlier, when you asked me what to play, that rook exchange wouldn't be so good. But yeah, after all, it is actually good for white.
Yeah, I mean, exchanging pieces is good. Yeah, you have an extra pawn, so that's something you
That
would
should be
like
enough.
to
Yeah. Okay.
welcome. Well, here Firouzja should probably give up the pawn on h5, and it's
Mm-hmm.
it's not easy at all. Something like king c6, and after rook takes h5, allowing rook b3, then you see that the white rook is no longer able to come back and guard these pawns. They are all sorts of annoying counter checks. Black is probably able to hold here, but instead he played a move g6. Now, rook goes back to e1. Remarkable rook maneuvers. Bishop goes to e4. Now the knight comes to c3. And you see that the bishop no longer has that many squares to stay on. Yeah, white is about to take on e4. If bishop goes away, pawn on d5 is going to be hanging. Well, rook f8 played. And now king g1. So the king goes into the
Huh.
wrong direction, but it's just that you don't want to go to e3 because then rook f3 check would have been played, right?
That's
So
a
that's
win.
that's why the king needs to go back. Here, I think Firouzja makes the decisive mistake of the game by playing the move rook f3, which we will analyze very soon. But what he should do is very interesting. Play a move like king c6. Not easy to see at all. But the idea is that after knight takes e4, you're not going to take back, but you
Mm.
play here the move rook to e8, pinning
Oh,
the knight on e4. And there's no good discover check here with the knight.
that's
There's no
hard to
discover check at
see.
all. And if black is able to take with a pawn and then get a king to d5, things are far from simple.
Mm-hmm.
But Firouzja played rook f3, and to be honest, I think rook f3 is such a natural move. Yeah, if you have the
Yeah.
opportunity here to attack all these unprotected points in white's position, there isn't just a more logical move than that. Knight takes e4, d takes e4. Now don't take the pawn yet because black is about to take on g3 first with check and then take the other pawn at the other side. Therefore, king g2. It's a nice subtle move to
And
defend.
finally, the king can move on light squares now.
The king is coming. Finally, this bishop is gone. Rook takes a3, rook takes e4. You're pawn up, but after rook to d3,
Hmm.
the king goes to f2. And it looks as if you're not able to do much here as white because the rook on d3 looks excellent. It's cutting off the king along the third rank. But black is also not able to do much because if you, for instance, try to activate a king with a move king c6, then rook e6 will be played. And after, let's say, king d5, you take on g6, king takes d4, rook g5 is there. You keep the pawn defended, and you're about to take on h5
That
next.
should do the trick. Yeah.
So black played here the move c6. And now for you viewers, and for you, Arno, of course, try to find the only winning move in the position. It's a very nice move, and it's not easy at all. But even pause the video for a second if you feel like you need some more time.
Here
But
we
it's white to
go.
play.
Once again, I'm thinking of g4 immediately.
You're rushing, yeah. Don't do that. Don't trade off too many pawns. You need your extra pawns.
Okay, I see. Well, in this case, well, if I go to f4 with my rook, the king will just go to e6, so I'm almost helping black. Not good.
Exactly. So the rook is actually fantastically placed on e4 to
Yeah.
protect the pawn on d4 and cutting off the king. Um, So the king cannot do much. Black also doesn't have any pawn moves.
Hmm.
And another problem is that the rook on d3 doesn't really want to go away. Because if the rook, let's say, goes to d1, then you're allowing white to bring up the king. So the rook is really needed on the third rank. But if the rook, let's say, goes to another square on the third rank, then the d pawn is no longer under attack. So that would enable white here
Okay.
to activate a rook, to hit the pawn on g6, for instance, with rook e5, rook g5.
Hmm.
So you see that black doesn't have that many moves. White also doesn't have that many moves, but the key move here, do you want to make a guess, Arne? Subtle waiting move? What do you think?
Subtle waiting move. Is it King G2?
King G2.
It is. Wow.
It is. It is. Yeah, you think what is the king going to do? Well, that's not relevant here yet. It's all about what black can do now. And as I said, you're in Zugzwang. The rook cannot go away. If you go rook
Mm-hmm.
d2, for instance, you go king f3. And let me show you one line. If the king can just attack here, then you pick up the pawn on g6, and you win also the pawn on h5. And that's why you should not trade all your pawns on the king side. These pawns,
Gotcha.
they are possible targets for the king and for the rook as well.
Okay. Interesting.
Another
Very.
point is that, for instance, if you play rook a3, it's rook e5. If the rook goes back, you are winning the pawn on g6. You give up the pawn on d4. But black is in big trouble because rook d5 runs into rook g5.
Yeah, I
Pawn
thought of
is
something
gone,
similar like this too. Yeah.
and the king and pawn endgame will
Nice.
be winning. So, well, black is running out of useful moves. Played here the move rook to d1. King comes to f3, rook f1. So at least now after king e3, you're not able to cross the f-file with your king yet, but there are alternative ideas. Rook f7, rook f4. Offering the exchange of rooks, it's of course possible thanks to the extra pawn. Rook g7 played, and now king d3.
Yeah, don't go to King E4 because there's another check and then King has to go
Exactly.
back.
You're not making progress. Now, the trick of this move king d3 is that black is not able to trade off pawns with the move g5 because of rook f5. Very nice idea. So that after g takes, pawn on h5, well, you may even still defend it, but you're not really getting happier with that because then the rook will be stuck for forever. So this is technically winning for white.
Okay.
In the game, king e6 was played, but now the rook comes in. And even here, if you play g5, it's rook h8, and you see that by moving the pawn away from g6, the pawn on h5 becomes even more vulnerable. Instead, rook a7 played, trying to become active, but now it's king to e4. And if you try to play it actively with rook a3, then, well, I think there are various good moves. The simplest one is king f4. And if you play something like rook d3, then rook d8, with the idea to come to d6 and eventually win the pawn on c6. That's looking like a very convincing.
Such a good idea.
Indeed. So after king e4, rook a1 was played.
Don't
And
go
now,
with the king.
now anyway, rook d8 was played in the game. The rook will come to d6, and you see that there are too many weaknesses on c6 and g6. You may give one or two more checks on e1, for instance, but the king is ready to walk up the board to g5, win the pawn on g6, and later the pawn on h5 as well. So here Firouzja had seen enough and resigned this position. Maybe this may seem premature to a lot of you, but the position is just really bad. The longer you look at it, white is a pawn up, more active. Black is having these weaknesses. It's not fun to play such rook end games. No, without any perspective.
What a fantastic win. Probably the highest rated win she ever had, I assume, but she won.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she had some very good results even
Yeah.
last year prior to her World Championship match. She defeated some 2,700 players. I think it was in an open tournament in United Emirates. Yeah, anyway, fantastic game.
Yeah.
And very sound positional chess. So I liked it for her. It was good for the tournament, good for the future of chess
True.
to see that women are really good chess players in general, of course.
Absolutely. With these words, we see each other next month for another episode of The Underdog.
Applause for Arne.
Now we can close the show in peace. See
Thanks
you,
a lot,
Robert.
guys.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.